Hey, welcome into another edition of the Rice Football Blue and Gray Preview Show. I am Matthew Bartlett, joined with JP Heath. As always, we're here to talk some Rice football, persevering through everything we can because we have two more games left. And after last season, I am not taking anything for granted, JP.
Amen to that. You got to savor it. These don't come around the whole year. So, yeah, you gotta embrace the moment. Looking forward to the trip and put that last one behind you. I think you can still make a statement for the season. But, yeah, good opener there. I like the attitude from the get-go.
And I thought it was interesting because I was looking up my pregame notes before we got into this. Rice and UTEP 5-5 in El Paso. So it's been an interesting series with the Miners, and then if you look back just the last couple of meetings, this has been, two of the teams that are, I guess, just kind of setting the stage for where we're at. Mike Bloomgren and Dana Dimmel hired at the same time, tasked with complete rebuilds of their programs, building it from the ground up exactly like they like it. And Bloomgren even alluded to in his session with the media earlier this week that they have some kind of similarities with how they want a game to go and kind of their strategy. So we got a Spider-Man meme, kind of two very similar guys facing off, two similar programs, both hoping to get to kind of the upswing. Is that kind of similarity kind of noteworthy? Does it make that game matter more, matter less?
Yeah, it's big. It's still an in-state rival. Up until last year's game was canceled with COVID issues on the UTEP side that have been the longest continuous run for Rice, and they pick up. I'm sure there'll be some fireworks. Yeah, and even some similarities with the team. You mentioned the philosophies between the two coaches, but they're missing their starting two safeties. Rice is missing some safeties and some other guys on the defense and some on the offense too. But yeah, you mentioned the parallels with the not only the mindset, but just when they got hired as well. And Coach brought something to me. I'm coming right out of the gate firing that he put in perspective, as coaches are wont to do, that Rice hasn't won 5 games in a season since 2015, and that is still out there for them to do, to win the last few games. And I think that would show still some progress coming into the season. A lot of folks said, oh, you've got to get to a bowl game, or you've got to get this and that. I forget where I was on that stance, to be honest, in this hot take world. I don't keep score on those things, but I think that would be a lot to tell some progress, and that's what makes these last 2 games not only very winnable, but a good, not off-season momentum by any things, but some tangible sign that things are going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so, and I kind of noted this. We're not going to go into a deep dive on kind of big picture things here, but I will note, Carter and myself on the Roost podcast this week, we kind of did the kind of open the onion, big picture look at Bloomgren and his tenure and kind of what's going on with everything here. And I noted in that conversation, and I've kind of talked a point, if Rice can win one more game, which would be convenient to start against UTEP on Saturday, they'll set a high for wins under Mike Bloomgren, which is 4, which would be, again, that would be a tick in the up direction. Like you mentioned, if they win 2 more games, not only is it 5 wins for the first time in a good while, it would also denote a rising winning percentage for every year that Mike Bloomgren has been here. Last year they were 2-3, which was 400. They get up to 5-7. You got to do some math there, and you're 41.6 something. Yeah, this is a Rice show, so somebody will be here to check my math. But yeah, so it matters. It matters to coaching staff. It matters to the players. Certainly want to finish things out on a hot run. I think I asked Naeem Smith, who is one of the healthy guys left in the Rice secondary. I said, what's your confidence that this team can go on a run and finish on a winning streak? This was before the Western game. He said, well, it's 100% because we've done it before. Rice closed out the last 3 games of 2019 on a 3-game winning streak. And conveniently, one of those was a win over El Paso in the desert. So kind of sets things up for maybe some similarities. Make a 2-game streak is easier to do than a 3, I guess. It's one less win. But certainly still as important and kind of setting the stage there. And also one more aside before we dig into the meat, I had a defensive coach at Rice tell me we were talking about secondary issues and who was available for one team and not. And he said, well, they don't cry when we don't have our guys. I was like, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So you're going to roll with who you got at this point and just kind of keep going. And then if we want to focus on the Rice defense to start, just kind of mix it up a little bit. I want to highlight Aiden Ciano is a guy that we're probably going to see a little bit more of this week, maybe a lot more. He got his first start last week against Western Kentucky, and a little bit of profile on this guy. Linebacker was brought in with Kenny Seymour and DJ Arkansas. Those three guys, three linebackers, were kind of the crown jewels, some of the highest regarded prospects, recruits that Rice signed in the previous class. So Arkansas has already gotten in the game, had his first career sack against UAB. Now it's Ciano's turn, and he kind of acquitted himself pretty well, filling in for Antonio Montero. And really, the front seven has kind of been coming into the form over the last couple weeks. What have you seen from Ciano, and then bigger picture, kind of the front seven, how they square off against UTEP?
Outside of reading all your reporting and the recruiting, but preseason, I remember asking Coach just broadly, like kind of just it was actually a low point in practice when they had a break and we were just small talk. I was like, hey, what do you think about these true freshmen? Are there any true freshmen? And selfishly, that helps me. I mean, obviously, reporting on the team on a snap-by-snap basis, but just helps me kind of know, okay, when this guy comes in, they're trying to do this. And you just, like, you just get the little nuggets that you file back away in my big old noggin, not so much your big old noggin. But one of the guys he mentioned was Ciano. And I've always thought about that. He might have been the first. He also mentioned, for the record, Ethan Onyanwa and 5 Pepe and DJ Arkansas was the other one. Not that he didn't think less of any of the other true freshmen or redshirt freshmen, but those are the ones that are the core that could be a big part of the future and continuing that rebuild process. When Ciano took the stage yesterday, it's a virtual stage for us, though, he was legit. He talked like he was a 24-year-old grown man. Like he's polished. You heard me mention him playing big boy football. I mean, he's not afraid of the spotlight going out there, and he can step up. And he himself mentioned it hasn't been as big of adjustment as he thought it was coming up to this level. It's still an adjustment, obviously, for speed and the strength of things, but he's been a good plug and play. And very anxious to see him paired up with whoever the other linebackers are the next few seasons.
Yeah, at the moment, it looks like we got Des Baker slotted in alongside him. Got a kind of had some consistency up four with the front four with the defensive line over the last couple of weeks. Gotten some pressure. The interception that they were able to get against Bailey Zappi, they were kind of able to get some pressure, force him to throw off schedule. And that's kind of how the turnover occurred that gave Rice a chance against Western Kentucky. They're going to need a lot more of that against UTEP in kind of a different phase, because against Western Kentucky, it was you got to take the ball away so that you can maximize your possession because they can score in a whip. But against UTEP, kind of that grinded out mentality, you got to take the ball away so you get another crack, because UTEP is going to try and do those 5, 6, 7 minute drives and kind of go down the field. If we flip over to the Miners side of the football, they got a stable of good running backs over there, and a quarterback that, there were a lot of uncertainties coming into this season among Conference USA quarterbacks. I think everybody was largely in the camp of, we think Bailey Zappi at Western Kentucky is going to be pretty good. Frank Harris had shown some things at UTSA, Grant Wells at Marshall. But other than that, there was nobody that you're like, this guy's going to be a dude. And Gavin Hardinson hasn't quite lived up to dude status per se, however you measure that. But he's been solid, and he's been a good part of why UTEP has been able to be effective enough on offense to kind of come through and win some of these games. So how does Gavin Hardison kind of stack up against the Rice secondary that is a little beat up?
You said something that I'm going to latch on to. I have many schnauzers, so they're not the most ferocious dogs. So some bulldog or some ferocious dog. I'm not going to gnaw on it too long, but Hardison's been really good. I thought this. I mean, he's averaging 250 yards a game. He's been consistent. Very well, you look at UTEP's schedule. He could be an 8-game winner. So I don't want, not that you were. I'm just saying he has been that quiet guy with that moxie that's led them. And when you have Jacob Cowling out there, that obviously makes you look a lot better. But philosophically, like we talked about on the very onset of this, Coach Nimble and his OC Dave Warner spent the last 13 seasons on the Michigan State staff. That kind of black and blue, nuts and bolts, blue collar mindset fits in well coming from the Michigan State side of things, what we all think of. Run it, and they're going to try to take the top off on the defense. So Coach Bloomgren just told me on Monday night, my days running together, but Monday night he was saying that they got to keep the lid on Cowling, and that is Hardison's favorite target. They don't go as much to the tight end as they have in the past, but it's all about the run game and then going deep to Cowling and some of the other folks. But they've got to keep a lid on those wide receivers.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you kind of look at some of the raw statistics, it's interesting because Jacob Cowling has 51 catches, 1,000 yards already in this season. He's averaging 21 and a half yards per catch. And when you see a catch rate, or not a catch rate, but a yardage rate like that, those are typically reserved. Once you get up past 16, 17, those are the guys that you're like, okay, we'll take 2 or 3 shots per game to you. You'll catch one 60-yard ball. Hopefully it lands in the end zone, and that's about it. There aren't many guys in college football that combine a high clip of usage with a high big play rate at the same rate that Cowling does. He only has 5 touchdowns, but he can go down the field and he can push some people around. So he's going to make the Rice secondary work. And that all kind of is going to rely on his availability or ability to get open, and availability for the quarterback to get him the football is going to play on what Rice has to do to focus and stop the running game, which is going to be a key in this one. And I have been kind of a big fan, if you can be fans of other Conference USA players. I really like what Dion Hankins brings to the table for UTEP in the backfield. An El Paso native, so that's kind of a little special flair for the Miners. But the 1-2 punch between him and Quadres Wadley are two guys, like we talk about Sincere McCormick at UTSA. We talk about Devin Price at FIU, kind of the top guys in the running game in Conference USA. I don't really hear much people mentioning Dion Hankins and Quadres Wadley, but pound per pound, if you're talking about a backfield combo, they're in the top half of Conference USA at least, and that's going to make it all the more challenging. You want to defend the pass, but if you're not solid inside, it's going to be hard for you. And Elijah Garcia has been kind of a fixture for the Rice defense up front. Who else? What else does Rice need to do to kind of limit? Because it's going to be a power running game that's going to hit you on the inside. This is not going to be just kind of like toss it and make some guy miss. These are some guys that are going to make this defense work.
Well, Captain Obvious, X's and O's I generally leave to Nate, but tell the stories and give obviously the pertinent info. But I know enough that the play action is going to be massive. And you've got Ciano out there, and for the first time that you mentioned Seymour, he's right behind Ciano on that depth chart. And so what do the Owls do? And I probably going out here soon, so I might be flipping on the sound, but in case I just go out on you. But the young linebackers, do they bite on that play action? And what do they do against the run game? It all starts with there. In previous games, we talked about, hey, maybe scoring you have to score at least 25, 30 points. I mean, you could win this one 17-14. So, yeah, we'll talk offense in a second. Constantine's still going to have to get his shots, but I think how the young linebackers respond to the play action and in tandem going with the lid on the defense, that will be a factor in this one. And both teams want to get out early, and both teams want to run the ball. Which team wins both of those categories? Because generally you don't have one without the other.
Yeah, if you kind of look at the UTEP or the UAB game rather from the end of last season, this is a different offense, but it has some similarities in the way UAB won their game last year. They had 2 shots that they hit on, and it was a defensive struggle the rest of the way. And that you mentioned this could be a 17-14 game, whether it's the Jake to Jake connection for the Rice offense and they can get one long score in there, or it's Jacob Cowing for UTEP. You have one big home run play, and that could be half, a third of the points that your offense scores for the day, and that could be differential. And so I want to flip over a little bit to the Rice offense. You talked about Jake Constantine a little bit. We saw kind of his first bad day at the offense against Western Kentucky, 4 interceptions. And if you kind of peel back and look at his Weber State days, controlling the football and playing smart and not turning it over, that was a problem from him. Interceptions were a problem when he was at Weber State, but he won and he found a way to overcome those mistakes. And we see a little bit of that razzle dazzle, a little bit of that cowboy cool, California cool they've said about him so far. So yeah, limiting the turnovers and the interceptions is one thing, but how does we talked about the UTEP defense kind of being out some guys. How does Rice in the receiving game and Jake Constantine stack up against the UTEP defense? And how does this get interesting? How does Rice get on the board?
Well, you tell me right now how. Hey, put it in the chat, right? Folks watching, they know we'd like to break a story. You tell me how they're going to guard Jake Bailey. It wasn't anything like, oh, she dropped 3 balls. They keyed on Bailey a lot. And August Pete, a great receiver in his own right, did have that one, had a drop and that costly turnover. They're developing more talent at the wide receiving core. This is the best receiving core they've had, I think, in 5-6 seasons, even without the best receiver in a long time since my guy Jordan Taylor, I think. But you tell me how Jake Bailey can get free. What did he have? 4, 5 catches in that one. So I think that has been a big one. When he had those back-to-back 143-yard games, that Jake-to-Jake connection we just didn't see against the Western Kentucky folks, Sappy Company. So I think that's a big one. We've seen Cedric Patterson and trying to involve the tight end more. I think the tight ends still are probably a year away from being a consistent threat, but at the same time, they've shown some glimpses this year. And I want all this stuff. Just tell me right now, right? Tell me Jordan Myers, how he's going to be, because you saw the effect on the offense, even in Ari Broussard, so you don't have your most consistent running back the last 2 or 3 games in Ari Broussard, I guess really 4 of the last 5 games. And then you're without Jordan Myers. We'll know more on his status later in the week. That affects it. It all goes together. I'm not breaking any new football science here. So that goes together. So if the Owls can get some running, and we heard from the dynamic Cam Montgomery yesterday, the big guy has proven he can lower the boom a little bit, but maybe not as much as Broussard. But if Broussard can be there, that would make me feel a little bit better. And then adding in Bailey, and obviously you want to keep Pete at a career high, 130 plus yards. You're not going to get that every week, but getting Jake Bailey back off of the defense that Bradley Dale Pivoto, who's been around forever and a day, as you know, has the SEC ties, been a former head coach, and he deserves as much credit as Dana Demmel for getting this defense to be really salty.
Yeah, if you would have told me that Cam Montgomery is having a season high in touches 9 games into the year out of the blue, I don't know if I would have believed you, but he did a couple things. He averaged, I think it was closer to like 5 yards per carry, or pretty close, and kind of some limited touches there in the second half against Western Kentucky. So at this point, it is all hands on deck and do whatever you need to get the dub. And I thought it was interesting that what we've seen so far, I think it's worth noting the Rice offense has kind of adjusted and evolved a little bit. And I think that's going to help them against UTEP should they get into trouble and not be able to run the ball to the same degree that they would like. We've seen this offense line up 5 wide a lot. Was telling somebody the other day, I think Rice has had a 5 wide empty backfield formation more times in the last 3 games than the previous 3 years under this staff. And I don't think that's an exaggeration, because I'm pretty sure they did it twice last year and both plays were taken off the board via penalty. So who knows? So I think we'll see more of that. And I think it's going to be interesting, especially in the running game. We haven't talked about him yet, and we were talking pronunciations before this. Praise Amueli. Did I get it?
Hold on, I've got my chart here, and I wrote it down just to and I had this the first time, and I need to send you, Bordy, but you got it there?
Yeah.
Praise Amahule.
Praise Katie
Amahule,
boy.
yeah.
Defensive end for UTEP. I think 5.5 sacks on the year so far, is as disruptive of a guy off the edge as Rice is going to face this year. The offensive line, which has played pretty well over the last couple weeks, is going to have their hands full. And he's not even the only guy that the front 7 wise, at least, Rice is going to have to worry about, I think. What can you tell me about, I think Keenan Stewart is probably the other guy worth mentioning, maybe Jadrian Taylor. They got some guys. They're starting to get older, more experienced on this line for UTEP.
Yeah, shout out to my former town of residence. Always like to follow the Lufkin Panthers. But Taylor on the other side of Amahule has been really good too. But Mike Bloomgren told us yesterday that their defensive line makes them go. And when I hear that from any coach talking about any opposing defense, I'm like, oh man, there's equal parts just envy and there's equal parts dread, because that is what you have to have for a great defense. The Owls' depth has been tested this season on the defensive line, but when the Owls were at their high point defensively last year, and I mean, I'm going back a while back to the conference championship year, all about that D-line, hitting the other quarterback, hit him hard, and just messing up the game plan. And I think UTEP has done a lot of that. They're not going to win the conference title this year, but that shouldn't be looked at like they don't have a dominant defensive line. They've been really good on the defensive line this year. And we've seen in other games, sticking in that Texas system against UTEP, like, oh boy. But on the other side of things, maybe the second best team in the Texas system, the Longhorns, sorry, yeah, I said it. That was a game where the Owls improved a little bit. Despite the 58-0 game, they improved after the Houston game where they didn't do so well. So the offensive line, this will be probably, it sounds weird to say, well, let's qualify it. Against the group of 5 opposition, this is probably the second best defensive line they'll face next to UTSA. Last week, Western Kentucky had the numbers. They were rotating in like 6 different defensive tackles and a couple of extra defensive ends. But yeah, I'm staying on. I'm not even going anywhere else in the secondary. As you mentioned earlier, they had those 2 safeties that have been injured. But how do you match up with the defensive line? I'm retracting what I said earlier, Bartlett. That is the key in this one here.
There's a couple keys. However, you can figure out a way to win. That's the key, right? But
Yeah.
I think it's interesting and worth noting, UTEP in conference play this year, the number 3 defense in Conference USA, which might not what you would have thought of the Miners of years past. And you have UAB, who is averaging 260 yards allowed per game. They are the gold standard, and they are far and away better than everybody else in this conference on that side of the ball. But you have a gap. Nobody else in Conference USA is allowing less than 310 yards per game. So there's a 50-yard per game gap. And then you have that next tier. And that next tier is UTSA and Marshall, which that checks out. We've heard their names before, and UTEP. So UTEP with one of the top 5 defenses in Conference USA that starts with that front 4, particularly that front 4 is going to be difficult. That's kind of the game within the game that I'm kind of watching, because how the Rice offensive line is able to fare against that. And we saw Jake Constantine against North Texas. He went, Johnny Football-esque, and he was rolling out and escaping and making plays and getting out of the pocket, and he just kind of willed this team down the field to tie the game up and force overtime against North Texas, which was great. But I don't think the game plan for 4 quarters, well, certainly it won't be the game plan, but I don't think the success rate for 4 quarters can be let Constantine run and throw all over the yard and try and escape and make something on the fly. It's got to start with the offensive line, which, as we've talked about for this program for years now, like that's kind of the bread and butter. And we need to see them, if they're going to finish strong, it starts up front.
Yeah, and the only other thing I'd add on that is they are top 4 in the conference, but also top 30 against a run. They only average giving up 124 yards rushing a game, and total yards, they're top 30 as well. With you did mention that 335 total, but they're no slouch at this group of 5 level. If you're going to build it, do it with defense, and they've got a salty bunch. I love the trips out to El Paso. And can't wait to get me some good grub there Friday night. L&J Cafe figured in there somewhere. And can't wait. We've had some memorable moments against UTEP in the past, and this won't have bowl significance, of course. But like you said at the very start, hey, you only get a few of these, so let's savor what we get, especially after the tumultuous 2020.
Yes, and I will close us with one thing. One thing that's kind of flown under the radar, because ultimately when you lose, you lose, and everyone has 100 fingers to point at everybody. But something that Rice has kind of regressed in this year and is the cleanliness of their play. Rice is averaging 7.5 penalties per game, which is near the bottom of Conference USA. They led the nation, JP, in each of the last 2 seasons in penalty yardage per game allowed. So that's a problem. But if there's a silver lining in that, UTEP actually is 13th in Conference USA in penalty yards allowed per game. So they have not been the cleanest team either. So you talk about if this is going to be a 14-7 game, a 17-10 game, something in that where it's a score here or there, if you can be the team that plays a little bit cleaner, that makes a little bit less mistakes, that doesn't allow that long touchdown, but doesn't give the free 15 yards, which Rice has done way too many times over the past couple weeks, that can be huge. So I'm going to slide in. This is like our 10th, 11th key to winning the game at this point. I'm going to slide in one more. Less penalties.
Here's another one. Play a perfect game. How about that?
Make that easy. All right. We're going to wrap up on that. We're going to close things down and pass that along to the coaching staff. Perfect game. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And you'll be good.
No.
I think that's
no seriousness. They do have a good shot in this one. And look for, you mentioned the penalties, but just cutting down on those. But early, setting the tone. You see the Owls respond early in the game, scoring first. I would not be opposed to them getting the ball starting off, or if UTEP wins the toss, we've seen that benefit the Owls in their wins, like getting that early offense. There's a formula here, and just hope they can finish strong and win these last 2 games. But early, the offense stopping the run and getting a couple scores on the board.
Yeah, we've seen this formula work several times. So nothing's changed. Rice knows what they need to do. They need to go execute. So that's where we're at. We'll be back at least for one more, which, man, I'm going to get a tear in my eyes. We're almost at the end of this run, JP, but one more after this.
Yeah, I'll be in, and I'm at a Starbucks now because for those that even cared or still watching at this point, the internet went down at the house, kind of in the sticks. But next week, I will not be in the sticks. I'll be in Fort Myers, Florida. So depending on Rice basketball and how they do Tuesday and Monday, dictating whether they play Wednesday, I will be coming from the Sunshine State.
That's right. You got a tournament down there. They changed the names of all these tournaments. I don't know which one. But yeah, basketball season started up. Another win for Rice yesterday. It'll be fun. We got lots going on, JP. I don't think we're going to get bored. That's the long and short of it. So,
we'll make
as
it happen.
always,
thank you, brother.
Yeah, make sure go follow. I personally, if you're not going to be at the game this weekend, go pull up the broadcast, listen to JP. It's the best you're going to get. I'll plug you because I enjoy listening to what you guys got going over there, you and Nate the Great. And then, as always, you can go find our stuff at theroost.com, patreon.com/@theroost, practice reports. And like we mentioned, we got basketball season and everything else starting. So we got you covered. We'll be back one way or another, rise or shine, win or lose, all of the above. So thanks for hanging with us, and Rice Fight
Never dies.